It's gone too far. Feeling like a prisoner in your own home. This morning we're hearing for the first time how villagers in Kirby Misperton are feeling about the disruption being caused by protesters trying to stop fracking taking place near their village. Now, many people had previously not wanted to come forward to talk about the action, but a recent protest in the centre of the village is being seen as a turning point. BBC Radio York's Mike Kemp was there as it unfolded.
Kirby Misperton last Friday afternoon. Anti-fracking protesters were by the roundabout, some police as well. Unusual for the centre of the village. I turned along the main street and from somewhere 3 men appeared in front of my vehicle, dropped on the road what looked like a black garden tub with 2 tubes sticking out either side. 2 of them put their arms inside and then lay down. A protester with a megaphone declared, "We have a lock on." Protesters cheered and hurried to the scene. Police immediately closed the road. A village divided.
Shouldn't be up here, should you know? My wife owns the nursery there. Luckily, all the parents have took the children home early.
There's anger, but this time it's villagers towards the protesters. This is Jack Atkinson.
There's no need for this, is it, when you're trying to get them down village?
I'm fed up of it, to be honest. I mean, it's a disgrace. A lot of people trying to get them down the village, they can't because these clowns laid it road. I know, it should be freedom of speech and all the rest of it, but I think there's ways of going about it. I mean, one of the residents couldn't get up to her sick dad because of this, so she's had to go a long way around, which is, it's out of order, to be honest. I mean, what if someone had a heart attack or somebody was, took them really ill?
And he's not alone. Keith Buckley is another. He admires the protesters for their commitment, but
fundamentally, I see the protesters now as being self-indulgent. They just so inward-looking into their sort of their cause that they can't see that there are other bigger pictures than the environment.
Other protesters bring blankets and mats for the 2 men lying in the road who are telling each other how many times they've already been arrested during 6 weeks of protests.
You beat me, I'm only on the 4th.
One 4 times, the other 5. Lee Colkill is a spokeswoman for the protesters. She defended their lock-on.
Well, we're not actually blocking the road. Before the police arrived, traffic was able to pass by mounting the curb and was doing so.
Why should people people can't get to their homes, drive to their homes now?
Absolutely, I completely acknowledge that we are causing a disruption and we really do apologise for it. However, it's the tip of the iceberg compared to the disruption that fracking is already causing for this community.
But it's this lock-on, the first in the centre of Kirby Misperton, which seems to have been the final straw and given villagers a voice to speak out against the protesters and the disruption and the road closures. BBC Radio York has been told that one day this week a 5-year-old had to be taken to school in a police van because of a road closure. We've been variously told the protests are getting out of hand, children are too scared to go out, one woman feels like a prisoner in her own home, carers in the village can't get through.
I just feel that we are being suppressed, we're being bullied, we're being locked in our village, it's not on, is it? It's not fair.
This is Ruth Hardy. She lives in Kirby Misperton. Her young daughter fell ill last week with stomach pains. It turned out to be acute appendicitis. When she took her to an emergency doctor's appointment, a road out of the village had only just reopened after a protest.
It's scary. It's scary living here, not knowing when the roads are open, when the roads are closed. If there's emergency, can the emergency services get in? And I think Holly having the appendicitis, that brought everything kind of real. And she's had this operation now, and on Friday we eventually got her out of hospital to come to the village and be unable to drive up a street to get her home safely. It's not fair. A lot of residents are really, really, really annoyed and fed up with it.
That's BBC Radio York's Mike Kemp talking to local villagers in and around Kirby Misperton. So what do you think? Do you live there? We have been contacted by people in the village to say that they feel it's now gone too far. And one woman says she feels like a prisoner in her own home because of what the protesters have been doing. Lee Colkill is one of the anti-fracking protesters. She joins me in the studio this morning. So first of all, Lee, let's talk about the disruption. Some children had to go to school in a police van on Monday. Now that's because the 2 wooden towers that had been built in the middle of the road were there and they couldn't get through. So what do you say to that?
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? How have we come to this point when, people are having to go to such extreme measures to try and stop the fracking company from coming in when, Kirby Misperton Parish Council voted against this development? I think everyone just wants quiet, peaceful Ryedale back when actually this is just the first well that Third Energy have got planned of 950 potential wells in the region. So this all has to stop. Fracking is a no-go. We all need to just go back to, quiet rural life.
But at the minute, that's not happening, and protesters are disrupting villages. I mean, we just heard from Ruth, who got stuck in traffic trying to bring a poorly daughter home from hospital. I mean, what would you say to her?
Yeah, that's completely unacceptable. And obviously, my heart goes out to that little girl. And it's scary when the village is full of police and people, are kind of being made out to be criminals for peaceful protest.
Are they peaceful?
Well, yeah, absolutely. No one has done anything remotely violent and has not been accused by the police of doing anything violent. And that is a line that we will not cross. We always take measures to make sure that the roads remain open. So like you heard in Mike's report on Friday during that lock-on, there was a gap to the side which emergency vehicles could have come through. Often the police choose that they're not going to allow people to pass by.
There's been bits where you just have to literally drive past on the pavement. I mean, that's not safe, is it?
Well, that was the only one, but...
So it's not always safe?
That was the only one where people have had to mount the pavement. But, I mean, people did it safely, after when Mike was there.
Which is good that it did. But, I mean, it could only take one child to run along the pavement for something else to have happened.
Well, I mean, we're all responsible. That's what this is about, taking responsibility. And, there are children living in Kirby Misperton whose lives are being affected. So last week there was a report that clearly showed the link between heavy metals and particulates in the air, which come from fracking and limit the development of the brains of children and babies. Like, this is not appropriate industrialisation next to a village where children live.
Let me just read you a couple of texts that have come through. Now, one is from someone who lives in Kirby Misperton. They say, for the last couple of months, the protesters have got worse. I feel so intimidated. I'm afraid to go out after dark. I don't even like walking around the village during the day in case the protesters are doing something. Leaving work, you never know if I'm going to get home. It's disgusting how the police are treated by the protesters. They deserve more respect. And then a second text comes in from another person who also lives in Kirby Misperton. They say, it is about time the villagers were heard. I am absolutely fed up of the anti-fracking protesters. My children have had to witness the anti-frackers screaming and swearing in police officers' faces. They were abusive to us residents and totally disrupted our village life. They cause nothing but chaos by doing lock-on and lorry surfing. You don't see us who live here 24/7 doing this. We just try to get on with our lives the best we can, and the anti-frackers are making this even harder. I was and am against the fracking, but unfortunately it's going ahead, and the anti-frackers aren't stopping the lorries from getting through, only delaying them for a short time that they are going to still get on to this site. What's your reaction to that, Lee?
Well, it's very telling, I think, especially that last part. That villager is against the fracking in their village but feels resigned and as though they have no choice. And I would just like to say there is strategy behind this chaos. It's 18 months since the NYCC gave permission for that well, and we've still got no frack. Third Energy have got hundreds planned in this region. They have got a long way to go. This fight is by no means over. I can only say that, we endeavour, being human, and sometimes people get upset, we endeavour to have peaceful discord with the police at all times, and nobody wants the aggro, so all I can say is please come down and talk to us at the gates, come and meet us.
I think the point of his text is that it's anti-frackers that are making his life a misery.
Well, but then there are villagers that are saying that the fracking company is making their life a misery. So what's on the cards here? If the protectors left and Third Energy were left to kind of do their thing without opposition, would that villager find that actually, they were peaceful where they were? Is that what they're asking for?
Let's just bring in Alan from Pickering. He's given me a call this morning and has been caught up in the disruption caused by the anti-fracking protest. You just pop your headphones on, Lee, and let's have a chat with Alan. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
So, Alan, what do you make of this then?
Well, I mean, I am like the rest of the locals. We don't want the fracking, but there's ways and means of doing your demonstrations. I mean, I've been intimidated. I go to work every day at Motherby, and every time they have a demonstration, it affects me. I have to go a long way to work. You've got to make allowances to get there, but you never know when they're going to do it. You can't forward think. You can't second guess them. If I'm late to work, you lose that pay. I have a young family I'm trying to support. Christmas is coming up. When we do drive past, for example, last week, I drove past one day last week. There was some demonstrators in the road, and they wouldn't get off the road. I had to drive round you, and all they did was stare at me, intimidating me. My wife is the same. She has one of her clients in a Motherby, and she had the same. She drove past, they stare at her. She feels uncomfortable, especially when she's on her own. And then when they have a demonstration, she's got to go at breakneck speed to get to the school to pick her daughter up. We're getting dark nights in the winter now. It's not good to have a child hanging around at a school gate when it's coming up dusk, is it?
No, I completely agree. I mean, Alan, what do you propose? You know, you've said yourself you're anti-fracking. You've said you've got a family.
To be honest, I think your beef is with the police, with authority. It's nothing to do with the fracking. You have a lock-on in the middle of Kirby Misperton village. One of the residents got out of a house and said, "Can't you move your car out?" There was 3 of you went towards her, intimidating her. I know that for a fact.
Well, I was there, and I don't remember that, but...
You don't do yourselves any favour, because I've seen your own films, you know, your internet films, where one of your, Mr. Spy, shall we call him, your cameraman, he called the police.
We'll have to leave it there now, Alan, I'm afraid, because we're running quickly out of time. It sounds to me a little bit, Lee, like you're starting to lose support of the local village.
Well, absolutely. You know, the fracturing of communities in other countries where fracking has happened is a well-documented effect. So when we fight fracking and fight third energy, part of what we're fighting is this discord within the community that always follows with this kind of industry.
It's a very interesting debate. Lee, thank you for coming in, and thank you for having a chat with Alan as well. If you would like to, and I'm sure you will because the text and the emails that are coming in, I simply can't get through them. If you want to have your say, your voice this morning, then it's 01904 641 641.
BBC Radio York. 11 minutes past 9 this Wednesday morning. So, for the first time, I think, really, villagers who live near the proposed fracking site in Kirby Misperton are speaking out. It's been difficult for some people to air their views until now, but now that the dam, it would seem, has burst and people are telling it as they see it and speaking from the heart about how they feel about the disruption that's been caused by, 6 or 7 weeks of protest so far. Some people say it's gone too far. Some say they have no support now from the local community. People are talking about feeling bullied, feeling like prisoners in their own homes. Your take on it, please. Protesters or local people, whereabouts do your sympathies lie? 01904 641 641. And if you actually personally fall into either category and you'd like to speak up this morning, please do. 01904 641 641. There's nobody to blame but you if you don't feel that your views are being aired on the show this morning. Ruth Hardy lives in the village of Kirby Misperton. I spoke to her just before we came on air, just before 9 o'clock this morning, and she told me what impact the protesters have been having on her and her family's life.
It's a daily stress, not knowing whether roads are going to be closed, whether the school bus is going to be late for the children, because when they close Hampton Road, all the other traffic has to travel along the other road that takes you alongside Flamingo Land, which is the road the school bus comes along. A lot of the times that road's single track, so it can be very dangerous putting a lot of extra traffic along that road for the school kids.
Is it a minor inconvenience or is it a real nuisance?
Well, it depends what the situation is. I mean, if you're getting up for your work at 4:30 in the morning and coming across a large bird nest in the middle of the road, you're cold, you're tired, you just want to get to work. It's an accident waiting to happen. It's It's not fair. It's not fair in the community. We feel very isolated here. We don't feel like we're being heard or listened to. And it's like I say, it's a daily stress because you just don't know what you're going to wake up to.
Well, you're being heard today and you're being listened to today. What do you want the world, the protesters, the police, Third Energy, what do you want them to know?
The police are doing a fantastic job in the face of what they're having to deal with day in and day out. I don't know how they do it. A lot more patient than a lot of us would be. I think the courts should be a lot harder. I think repeat offenders should go to jail. I don't think other people should be allowed to pay their fines because they're just getting out and they're just coming out. Some of them are bragging how many times they've been arrested and then just getting out that night. It's not fair.
Do you not take on board their claim that what they're doing is trying to protect the environment, they're trying to protect the future of Kirby Misperton and villages like it all over the country from what they see as the dangerous practice of fracking?
Yes, I take it on board. I actually just looked at a comment at the top. They're saying that we're hypocritical because we don't agree with fracking, but we don't agree with what they're doing. I'm not a hypocrite. I've been called loads of things online. I've been called a bigot, a coward, lots and lots of things. I think they should protest. By all means, protest. Don't block roads. Don't make our community unsafe. Don't walk about with your face covered. A lot of them walk about with their faces covered every day. It's quite scary for the kids. It's not the police that's scaring the kids. My children are not scared of the kids. They're the police. And it's a tough one. It's very, very tough for us here.
If we had a protester speaking to us at the same time, they might actually say that some of the things that you're objecting to about what they do are actually caused by the police. So the covering of faces, the nature of the actions that they're taking, because they feel like part of their battle to protest is actually with the forces of law and order that are frustrating them.
Exactly my next point. They do not take responsibility for their actions. They blame the police or they blame Third Energy. At the end of the day, you can stand and protest. They can do the slow walks. They don't have to be up in the face of police and screaming at them. There's no need for that carry on, and they're losing a lot of public support around the area.
Do you think they are? I mean, we say that and you say that, and then we will immediately hear from somebody in the area who says, actually, no, they do still have my support. I am with them. Who's right, do you think, Ruth? You're a good sort of you're a good estimator of what the local mood is.
Oh, the village of Kirby Misperton is not happy, and I'm not saying there's not people here who agree with them. For instance, there was a young girl. She goes to the gate on a daily basis as much as she can. She's sitting her GCSEs at the moment. She witnessed just about a fight, a proper argument with a protester and a villager the other week there, and she posted on the protesters page, please be respectful of the villagers. And some people were supportive of her, but a lot of them were you don't understand what we're doing. This girl was at that gate day in and day out. She is and she was asking for the protesters to respect the villagers. Please respect the villagers.
And in what other ways do you think they're not showing respect? If there are some key guidelines, just a couple of things that you would say to the protesters listening this morning about the way that you would like them to behave so that they don't put people's backs up in Kirby Misperton, what should they do or not do?
They shouldn't be blocking roads. There shouldn't be lock-ons in the village. They should keep it outside the gates. I know the police park across the gates during the night, but they don't park across during the day. They're allowed to protest during the day, which is when the lorries come in. So protest at the gate. Keep it out the village. Don't shut roads.
You found yourself in a very acute situation in all this, didn't you, with your daughter's health issue the other day. Yeah. Has that left you particularly embittered or angry towards the protesters, do you think?
The day that Holly was not well, I was really, really concerned because there was a surfer on a lorry on the Kirby Misperton Road, which is the road we leave to go to the doctors. Now, I am not local to the area, as you can tell by my accent. We've only stayed here for a year. So I can't just about turn and go an opposite direction. I don't know how to. But fortunately for us, the road was open when we left. But coming back on Friday, there was a lot of protesters in the village, in the main street, and I couldn't get Holly straight home. I don't know what was going on up the street. It was about 5-10 minutes before the lock-on. But I couldn't get Holly home because of all these people that were in the main street in Kirby Misperton that I was very, very angry that day.
What would be your fears about another incident, another health emergency or something else happening in the Kirby Misperton area that required speedy road access in or out?
The same as everybody else's. We're scared that there's going to be an emergency in this village or nearby villages, and the emergency services, like you just said, are not going to be able to get in or out. It's not fair. It is a daily stress. It's the last thing I think of when I go to my bed at night, and it's the first worry that's on my mind in the morning. Should I have to live like this? They talk about their human rights and their right to protest. Where's my human rights and my right just to go about my daily business on as normal as the person that lives, 15, 20 mile away?
Where are my human rights, asks Ruth Hardy, speaking to me just before we came on air this morning. She got an appointment, so we weren't able to speak live on the programme, but we thank her for her time. And she paints a very vivid and I think quite a reasonable picture of what she says are her genuine concerns and the concerns of other people in Kirby Misperton. Do you echo what Ruth says this morning, or do you take issue with what Ruth says this morning? I mean, it's as simple as that. Do your sympathies lie with someone who's outlining problems like that, or do your sympathies lie with the protesters who say, hang on a minute, what we're doing is really very important? You know, we're sorry about disruption that's being caused, but that is of the essence of what we're doing. Let's speak to Ian Conland. He is from Frack Free Rydale and is with us on the line now. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning.
Welcome to the programme. You hear Ruth there making what, on the surface of it, apparently some very reasonable points. As somebody that supports the protesters, which you are from Frack Free Rydale, what's your response to Ruth?
I may have a very similar view if I lived inside the village to what's been happening, but I think the blame isn't entirely with the protesters. If we need to rewind back to what's happened first, is fracking has been approved against the wishes of the local people, and I'm one of the local people. I'm from nearby Moulton. Moulton has also rejected it.
Can I just stop you there? I mean, the blame for the way the protesters are going about the protest and the impact that they're having on local people's lives, that lies with nobody but the protesters, surely.
Right. Okay. Could I if I could go finish what I was saying? The next thing, a very key decision by the police was to close the footpath outside the site. Now, that would have been the perfect place to have a safe, peaceful protest off the road, and it would not have disrupted anybody in the village. Okay. Now, the police have actually closed that footpath, so the local people have no access to that footpath anyway. We could have had only protest on that footpath. That would have really disrupted Third Energy, and that is why all the disruptions happen, is because the police have moved the protest, have denied our protest on the footpath, and have moved it onto the road. That decision has caused what's happened.
Has it really? Because what we're...
Absolutely.
Well, come on, hang on a minute.
I have never protested in the village.
No,
I have never once. I am local. I know what it's like. I had a convoy go down the bottom of my road, Middle Cave Road, in Moulton. And that was because there was a blockage at Kirby Misperton, so they sent the convoys through Moulton. I went absolutely ballistic because they did not ask my permission, Moulton's permission, in the traffic management plan to go through Moulton. And now we have, the convoys have now gone through Moulton, and hundreds of people have seen it now going through Moulton, and they are concerned about convoys going past my children's school.
You talk about that. Hang on a minute. You talk about the footpath, and you say that had the police allowed protests to take place on the footpath and not closed it, then things might be better than they are. But there are other issues. I mean, the lock-ons that we've seen in the middle of the road. This business of people sort of concreting themselves in the middle of the road. Now, are you telling me that if the footpath was open, they'd be conducting lock-ons there? Because that's a deliberate tactic to disrupt transport.
Yes, it is absolutely, because our community said no to fracking, and the government have ignored our community. It's the government that are ignoring the community. The protesters are here on the whole, overwhelmingly, most of them are here to disrupt Third Energy. They have tried lock-ons in front of the site, and now they've parked their vans, so we're unable to do lock-ons in front of the site. Now, people have had a range of views about doing lock-ons in the road, but fundamentally, we are trying to stop fracking, and we want to do it in as least disruptive way to the community as possible. And I believe the lock-on in the village was done in response to the police trying to move a resident's vehicle. So I think it was a response because they were trying to stop the rig getting out.
Ian,
because the rig is costing them a lawful lot of money to keep on site.
Ian, are you concerned when you hear what you hear this morning, which is the claim, the accusation, and you may choose to reject it, but the claim that because of the nature of the protest, because of the behaviour of some of the anti-fracking protesters, that actually you are in grave danger of losing, if you haven't already lost, any support you had from many, many local people?
I do not believe that there will be another lock-on in the village.
No, that's not the answer to my question. The answer to I'm looking for an answer to this, about the sympathies of local people, whether you've lost them.
I know many of those local people personally, and they are absolutely 100% behind the vast majority of the protests happening. We've had to have a word with one or two people who've been a little bit aggressive with certain local people, and we've reminded them this is the way we protest. We protest by having a tea stall behind. We politely protest. Unfortunately, I have personally experienced at times certain police officers push me out the way when I have been having my peaceful protest. So I've been on the brunt of police action. Now, most of the time, I am able to have some sort of protest, but that's not always the case. Sometimes I do get pushed out rather rapidly out the way, and I've made my feelings known to the police. But I want to encourage everybody in the local community to have their own way of protesting, whether it's writing letters and documenting what's going on, documenting the gas leak that Third Energy didn't tell the local community about. We want to highlight it's the frackers we're opposing, okay? And we want to maintain as good a relationship. And I'd like to come and talk to villagers, and I would like to talk to other protesters and make sure we haven't got a division between protesters communities, because the vast majority of villagers don't want the fracking. And that's all we want. We don't want fracking, and Mike, I don't want fracking near Moulton.
Ian, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you feel you've had a fair say this morning. That's Ian, explaining from the point of view of Frack-free Rydale, a local person, lives in Moulton, not actually in Kirby Misperton, but he's angered at the activities that he's seen going on through Moulton, explaining why he thinks that local people are on the side of the protesters. He admits that one or two people have had to have a word with them about some of the things they've done or said, but generally speaking, thinks the local community in Kirby Misperton is still behind the fracking protest. Is he right? 01904 641 641. It is Jonathan Gant with you through until midday today. It's Adam on air after 12. Let's go to Steve, who is with us on the line this morning. Good morning, Steve.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. What's your take on this situation at Kirby Misperton at the moment? You live in a nearby community.
Yeah, I live in the local community. I worry about the perspective that's going on here, because you're talking this morning about a social media group that's been set up. Now, there's going to be extreme views on both sides of the campaign, from anti-fracking, pro-fracking, but I do worry about the perspective that's happening. I mean, you had a prime example this morning in your breakfast show. You had an anti-fracking protester person on, and then you cut to Rosemary, who ran a Macmillan Trust event at Great Hampton. And I think it needs to be pointed out that community is still going on in this area. And I worry that perspective is being lost with the media in particular, focusing on some of the issues that are quite extreme and aren't really reflecting the majority of opinion in the area.
What do you think the majority opinion is?
I think on both sides, there's a view on pro-fracking and anti-fracking, and there's a difference between the campaigning and some of the protesters. I think it's just, I worry that it's a social media group, and I scanned the social media in the local area, and there's threats to protesters, violent threats to protesters all over social media. There's aggressiveness from some protesters to people in the village who shout out against it. So, okay, strategically, the lock-on Friday probably wasn't a good idea. But on the flip side of that, of course, the road closure signs are being left up 24 hours at a time, which is disrupting businesses in the area when there is no road closures. So I think we just need to draw back a little bit on this whole issue and get a bit of perspective of what's going on.
There's a lovely word which is nuanced, isn't there? A nuanced approach, so that it doesn't just become a black and white, a completely polarised issue. To appreciate that there are degrees and shades of opinion in this.
Completely. I mean, like I say, there's going to be extremes on both sides of the argument, you know. And I mean, I know people in the village who anti-fracking campaigners that have had their house targeted by pro-fracking groups in Rydale. It's going on both sides, this argument. And like I said, we need to get some perspective. And Radio York, to be brutally honest, has a duty to help build the community in the area, you know. And I think we're focusing on too much sometimes on the negatives of what's going on. The negatives to me.
What we're doing our level best to do is to be fair to all sides and to give everybody a voice and the opportunity to state their case and to take the temperature, I suppose, if you like, of how local people feel. I mean, the lady I spoke to, Ruth Hardy. You know, she's very upset, asking me right at the end of our chat, where are my human rights in all of this? So, we're not putting words in anybody's mouth. We're just giving people like you this morning the platform to say what you want to say. That's our job. That's our job.
I'm not defending the action that happened in the village last Friday, but this is a one-off action in that village. I mean, I'm disrupted in my work. I have to travel around Rydale. I have to go to Pickering from where I live in Hampton. But I'm quite happy to drive 3 miles around a diversion, and it's that level of perspective we need to do. The aggressiveness. I've been down to the site a few times, and the aggressiveness on towards the police, for instance, I really don't condone at all. But then again, I don't agree with the aggressiveness from some of the people in the villages, and it's a certain amount of people. I mean, I'm by no means putting everyone in the village in the same category, but there is people going past and they're swearing and they're shouting, and there's threats online to people on both sides here, and this is what worries me. Is maybe it's a bigger argument that social media here is maybe part of the problem is inciting some of this, because it happens in all walks of life.
Steve, we're going to leave it there. You've made a very interesting observation. Thank you very much indeed. Steve, who lives in one of the neighbouring communities, with his perspective on this, I think saying, everybody please draw a deep breath and don't become too polarised, too angry on this, and maybe just reflecting on the way social media works, which is something we've talked about on this programme before now. People say things on social media and write things that they wouldn't dream of saying to somebody else's face. People just get a bit carried away and say the most aggressive and very often extremely rude things on the social media. Think about your use of it. You do have a responsibility. Steve, thank you very much indeed for your input this morning. At 25 minutes to 10, it's Jonathan Count with you through until midday today. Let's go to Jack, who is on the line, who actually lives in Kirby Misperton. Good morning, Jack.
Very good morning to you.
Hi. What's your stand on the protest and the way it's been policed and the way it's been handled so far?
I think the police have been outstanding. They've got an hard enough job as it is. But I think the protesters, to be honest, are a total disgrace. The way they're going about things is totally the wrong way.
In what way? What do you object to most about what the protesters are doing and the way they're doing it?
First of all, I witnessed one other day spitting a police lady's face, which I think's barbaric. And the second thing is stopping normal traffic, like the lock-on on Friday, the lock-ons and building towers, and just been a total pain, to be honest.
That is part of what they're there to do, they would say, I suppose. They're making their point, and if they didn't make it in a very forceful way and a way that did disrupt people, their protest could go unnoticed, and that's the last thing you want if you're organising a protest.
No, I disagree, especially when villagers can't get back and from home to work. I just think the way they're going about it, it's not. This is not become now a peaceful protest, and the village has become so divided. It's just horrendous.
Well, you say divided. I mean, are there people in the village who, unlike yourself, approve of what the protesters are doing?
Yeah, I would say so, yes, without a shadow of a doubt.
What sort of... I mean, you know, Kirby Misperton is, with all due respect to it, a beautiful place, but a tiny little place. What's that going to do to the community if there are people from Kirby Misperton, some of whom say, yeah, right on, you're doing a great thing, protesters, others like you, who are quite angry and upset about what they're doing?
It's just going to divide it. People aren't going to go on. It's going to make it a lot more of a miserable place to live. I'm all for, you know, protesting quietly and, you know what I mean, going about the right way about things. But shouting at people, getting in police's face, trying to jump on wagons, putting their own lives as well as the police's lives at risk. I mean, for instance, on Friday, my wife was walking home and my daughter is only 8. Now, I don't wrap her up in cotton wool, you know, but protesters were screaming and swearing. She don't need to hear that on her own doorstep. Not in a quiet village, you know. We're not living in a city, you know. It's just totally getting out of hand.
Who were they screaming and swearing at, Jack?
The police.
Right, so it wasn't your wife and your daughter who were being sworn at. They were just. She was just.
To witness it,
they were just overhearing it. One question I haven't asked you.
Yes.
Do you support fracking?
No.
So you're anti-fracking, but you're also, ironically, anti the anti-fracking protesters.
I am. These bunch of people, yes.
Jack, thanks very much indeed for your thoughts. There's a dilemma for people. I mean, really a dilemma. You might be opposed to fracking, but you're also opposed to the way that the anti-fracking protesters are going about what they're doing. Sharon is on the line and has been protesting at Kirby Misperton, I'm told. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning.
Hi. Did you hear what Jack had to say there?
No, I didn't. I can't get a signal here and I can't get to the phone.
Right. OK, well, I will tell you what he's just said. What he said is he supports your cause. He supports the anti-fracking stance. He just opposes the way that it's been gone about because it's causing offence and it's dividing his community.
I have heard a lot of that down here. And actually that quite concerns me. But on the other hand, I was here Friday and the police were very heavy-handed. And afterwards, they smirked. And I'm a reasonable person, 50 years old, in a wheelchair, and let rip at policemen smirking at how they were handling. Mainly, I think I was one of the youngest at 49. At how they were rough handling people. There was 62, well, one person said 60 police, one person said 90 police for a handful of older people.
Are you
was at the gate.
Are you local to Kirby Misperton?
I am not local to Kirby Misperton, but I am local to fracking.
What are you doing there is what a lot of people ask. Why if you're not a local person, if this won't affect you because it's not happening in the area where you live, why are you spending your time there?
Right, like I said, I'm 59 years old. I'm actually in a wheelchair. I'm disabled. I've got a transplanted kidney. I'm on immune suppressants, and this is not conducive to my health. But I have a daughter, and fracking is coming to Hull. And my job is to protect my daughter for the health effects of fracking all over. It's not only, even if it was only happening in Kirby Misperton, I've walked around the area, there's a lot of farms here. It's going to be in our food supply. Whatever contaminants the animals is in the land, in the water, in the air is going into the grain, is going into the animals, it's going into the milk.
And you have
and how are we going to know what we're eating?
And you have local people who share those concerns, but have the strongest objection to the way that their lives, the peace and quiet of Kirby Misperton, is currently being disrupted by behaviour that they say simply goes too far.
I have only been down the gate. I have not seen what's happening elsewhere. I've not been involved in lock-ons or anything like that. However, how do we stop the government going against its people? I believe Kirby Misperton, as well as Hull, and all over the country, people are saying no, and yet our government is forcing it upon us. The police, they're like publicly funded private security. Third Energy or Quadrilla if you're over in PNR, or, homicide police if you're down that way.
And yet, our last caller, sorry to cut you off there, but our last caller, Jack, said he had nothing but admiration for the way the police were handling themselves. He was appalled the other day to see a protester, I think he said a female protester, a protester spit in the face of a policewoman on the protest line.
I have not witnessed anybody doing that. I know passions get heated with the way we're being handled, and I'll tell you, I had the greatest admiration for our police forces up until coming and seeing how they're handling the situation here. Like I said, Friday, it was mainly older people, and they were pushed, they were shoved, they couldn't move, and it was also, we couldn't jump on the back of a lorry. I can tell you now, it would have took 60 police to have got one of us on the back of that lorry. There weren't one of us that could have got out of a chair that quick without groaning or creaking. It was just overzealous policing.
Sharon, thank you very much indeed for your opinions this morning. Let's go to Derek, who joins us on the line now from Kirby Moorside, and he's actually a local councillor. Good morning, Councillor Chapman.
Good morning, John.
Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What's your take on this situation?
I've got a real concern for the way the narrative has become so extreme and polarised. It really sort of negates the real point that people are trying to make, be they moderate or be they more youthful and exuberant, shall we say. The point is about the imposition of fracking, and I use the word imposition quite strongly because that, I believe, is making things worse.
We devoted an entire 3-hour programme, this programme, to the subject of fracking on BBC Radio York a couple of months ago. So we've discussed the pros and cons of fracking and given all sides the option to talk about it. What we're focusing on today is what is perhaps a very real concern for the Kirby Misperton community, who you'll empathise with because you live not that far away, and the way they seem to be feeling about it, and the fact that some people who are anti-fracking are being almost turned by the activities that many see on behalf of the anti-fracking protesters as being unacceptable.
No, of course, if people are inconvenienced, it's important to talk to them. Of course, everything should be done on all sides to mitigate problems and to engage with problems.
Can I just interrupt you again? Inconvenienced is not the word that we've heard this morning. We've heard stronger words like bullied, intimidated, threatened, frightened.
Okay, well, that is a serious concern and obviously needs to be acknowledged. I would make the point that is not the majority of what goes down there. I've been down to inspect and to observe and to engage on a number of occasions, and the vast majority, it's not that level of demeanour. It's not that. So to hear that characterise the protest is a concern, though I absolutely acknowledge should those incidents occur, they should be engaged with. That's not the norm, and I would hate for people to think that is the norm of behaviour anywhere in Rydale. This is a Rydale protest, and we're happy to have support because this is a national protest as well. So it's a very difficult situation, Jonathan, and ultimately we're all stuck in the middle, and we're all sort of learning to come through it and to minimise the consequences.
What can you are an elected leader of the local community, what can you and others in your position do to try and help the situation?
Encourage negotiation, encourage discussion, encourage to get past this divisive debate and to actually engage with the fact that protest is going to happen. It will have some effect, and we need to work to minimise that effect. I mean, personally, I find the comparison between this and the whole fracking imposition, it's quite telling. This is what many people in Rydale have felt for a long time now about the inconvenience and the disruption coming. It now has actually landed on the doorstep in Kirby Moorside. So, of course, we empathise with people's difficulties. Of course we do. It's important we do. But that's not the main narrative. I'd like to move past that. I'm going to also make a point, Jonathan, that I do think, as a supporter of the police, and I've worked with the police, I wish they could do more to sort of reduce this narrative as well, to sort of help calm things down.
It will only happen if all sides keep talking, and we're happy to provide a forum for that if we can possibly play our part in it. Councillor Chapman, we'll leave it there. I'd just like to move on and hear some more opinions, but thank you very much indeed for your contribution to the programme this morning. Let's talk to Suzanne, who's in Kirby Misperton. Good morning, Suzanne.
Good morning.
Hi. Whereabouts do you stand all this? Whereabouts do your sympathies lie? You're a local person. Are you a supporter of the idea of fracking going ahead? Are you anti the fracking? And what do you think about the actions of the protesters?
I am anti-fracking, and I'm so pleased the protesters are here, because Third Energy would just come in and just take over this village. It has been a nightmare. I was actually in the village on Friday with protesters, and the police came in and they started trying to move cars out of the way. And we're like, well, what's going on? You know, there's no yellow lines. People that live in the village can park their cars. There was about 30 police. They started putting wheel things under cars to move them. And what it was all about, they shut the road. The police shut the road. It was to let the lorries through. But before the lorries came through, people that lived in the village with cars, one lady, she stopped right by me and was so rude, like saying that we had closed the road, we're like scum of the earth and all this. And actually it was the police, and the police were standing there and didn't even say, actually, it was us that shut the road to let the lorries through. So it's dividing the village really bad.
Do you know, when we started out this morning's programme, I sort of had a mental picture of two circles, as it were. There was one circle in which there were people who supported the fracking protesters and one against. There's a third circle that's just become clearer and clearer as the morning has gone on, and that third circle, in that third circle is the word police.
Yeah. The police are trying, police have to do their job. But, to say that it was us that closed the road, it wasn't. The police shut the road, wanted to move the cars out the way because of these huge lorries that are coming down.
But if that's the police's job, if the police's job is to facilitate Third Energy going about their lawful business of starting the test frack and building the site and all the rest of it, then that's what the police have to do. That's what they are legally obliged to do.
That's fine. But please tell people that is what they are doing. Don't blame the protesters. I'm an ordinary person. I've never done this sort of thing in my life. But I feel so strongly about it. But now, if I walk up the village, I hate walking up my own village.
That's a dreadful... it's awful to hear you say that.
Yeah,
I don't want you...
people are so nasty. I don't like to walk up my village anymore. And that is not fair.
What do you say to the people like Ruth, who we heard from at the start of the programme?
I've heard a lot from Ruth.
Who says it's not fair that activities by the protesters mean that roads get closed down and her poorly daughter can't get to and from hospital.
Because the police make it look that way all the time, and it's not.
Is that a genuine accusation that the police are somehow engineering a situation so that the local people believe that it's the protesters' fault, and you're actually saying this morning that it's the police's fault for the way they're going about handling it?
Yeah, because on Friday, it wasn't the protesters that shut the road. The police shut the road to let the lorries through, and maybe they should say what they're doing instead of everyone thinking it's the protesters.
Suzanne, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. We can all hear the emotion in your voice, and I'm sorry that you feel that way about your local community. Oh, please, people in Kirby Misperton, be patient with each other and realise that people have got strong views. Don't fall out over this, please. I know it must be very, very difficult, but just, keep it in some kind of perspective and don't be divided by it, for goodness sake. That's not what North Yorkshire needs, and not what a small community like Kirby Misperton needs. Let's talk to Denise, who is actually Councillor Denise Craghill, who is in York and a councillor for the Green Party, if I'm informed correctly. Councillor Craghill?
Yes, that's correct, Jonathan, yes.
Good morning. Crikey, what a situation seems to be arising in this small community of Kirby Misperton. Whereabouts do your sympathies lie?
Well, as a Green Party councillor, I'm obviously totally against fracking. It's obviously a crazy, dangerous, dirty, sort of unnecessary form of energy. And
I think as a Green Party councillor, probably your view on it is a given. What we're talking about this morning is the way that the protest is affecting the lives of local people and is in fact turning some local people against the protesters.
Yeah, well, I think this is obviously it's an important concern, and it's very worrying, as we've just heard with the previous speaker, that emotions are running a bit high in the village. But I think we have to remember that it's the fracking that's causing this. And the protesters that are there because they believe so strongly that fracking is the wrong thing to do, and many local people, including villagers, agree with that. And I do think it's a shame that the police seem to be increasingly acting a bit as security guards for Third Energy. I know they have a very difficult role to carry out, and I have seen them policing in very positive ways as well, but I think the balance is tipping far too much in the direction of them acting as security guards for Third Energy. I was there when the car was removed, and it was perfectly legally parked car. There was no sort of forward notice that this is what the police were going to do to clear the road to get the rig out. So I do think there are questions about things like that. Also the way they've moved people who've been locked on in quite a dangerous way, which I've written to the Assistant Chief Constable about. I haven't had a response on that yet.
Can I say to you, hang on a minute, can I just say to you what I said to Councillor Chapman from Kirby Moorside a few minutes ago? You know, elected community leader, respected person who's gained the votes and gained an elected local seat. What can you do, and what can people like you do to make sure that society, the local community, doesn't get so divided that there are, rifts that will take a long time to heal?
Well, I suppose one answer to that would be to have more dialogue with the police, particularly, because I do appreciate the police are in the middle of all of this, and I think that perhaps there is an argument of having a far more dialogue with the police about how things like that can be managed. I did want to say I think the person I caught you was worried about emergency services getting through. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think that's a realistic problem one way or another. If an emergency service needs to get through, it's going to get through. Everyone's going to cooperate.
Really? I mean, if someone has concreted themselves in a barrel in the middle of the road and they simply can't be moved?
Room to go round. The only thing there's not plenty of room for is something the size of a fracking rig, which is an extraordinary big size. So I think, there's practicalities there. The other point I wanted to make, though, was although this level of disruption is a serious issue, one of the reasons why protesters are so concerned about protesting against what's happening now at Kirby Misperton village is that if this continues and goes ahead, there will be fracking rigs like this all over Rydale. The whole way that fracking works and works everywhere else in the world is that there will be hundreds of fracking rigs.
Councillor Crackhill, we'll leave it there. I suspected that's what you might want to say, and we're not talking about the pros and cons of the issue at the heart of this. We've, as I say, devoted 3 hours of the show to that some months ago now. Good morning, it's Jonathan Cowart with you for a Wednesday morning. It's the 1st of November. Well, we've had a discussion and a debate that's taken off so much this morning on BBC Radio York that we've taken the almost unprecedented decision. As I say, we've only ever done it once before, to say, do you know what? The strength of opinion, the volume of opinion is so great this morning that we really ought to just, well, unfortunately scrap our plans for the next hour of the programme, or at least half hour of the programme. And what we were going to do, we will do another day. So you can hear about the new farm manager at Askham Bryan College on another day, and she's fantastic and has got a great story to tell. But just the strength of opinion this morning is so great. Ron in York, with his comment this morning is this. He has this message for the people of Kirby Misperton. He says this: lobby your county councillors, because, he says, they gave permission for this operation, the fracking operation, to go ahead. They should be called to account by the residents of Rydale as a whole. Ron, thank you very much indeed for that. Lots more texts and comments coming in this morning. On the email this morning, Jim in Pocklington says, Jonathan, protesters should be able to demonstrate their opposition to fracking whilst remaining within the law and minimising disruption to the residents of Kirby Misperton. I would like to ask the following question, he says, to anyone who thinks that people should not be protesting. He asks this: if there was an issue you felt strongly about, how would you feel if people said you cannot or should not protest against it? He says the right to protest is our democratic right. Jim in Pocklington, thank you very much indeed. Email address for the show is Jonathan, JON, at bbc.co.uk. Let us speak to another councillor this morning who's got some views on this, Rydal District Councillor Di Keel. Good morning, Di, and welcome to the programme.
Good morning.
I should say for which political party you stand.
I'm a Liberal Democrat.
A Liberal Democrat.
Yeah.
What a situation. You are part of the Frack Free Rydal movement, I think I'm right in saying?
I am, and I'm also part of Frack Free United, which is, although I'm a Liberal Democrat, is trying to get a political consensus against fracking.
So you oppose fracking, and then, as you hear this morning, there are people in Kirby Misperton who are maybe equally opposed to fracking, but they certainly don't like the way the anti-fracking protesters, or at least some of them, are going about it.
Yes, I can understand that. I'm very grateful that you've extended your programme on this, Jonathan, because I think it is one of the biggest issues that Rydal has ever faced, and I think it's very important that everything is aired. I have to agree with Ron, who was just on, saying that, yes, lobby your county councils. Also, lobby your MP, because we also all know where our MP, Mr Hollingake, stands on fracking, and he's very pro-fracking, and I would encourage people to do that. I think it's really sad that we've got polarised views in the village now over the campaign against fracking, but I think it's what the industry, it's achieved one of the things it wanted to achieve, which is to divide the community.
Well, hang on, hasn't that been achieved, actually, by the behaviour of some people? I mean, you know, I don't know, because I haven't been there myself, and I've been quite deliberately, I haven't gone to look for myself, because I want to hear what everybody else around North Yorkshire hears, rather than make some kind of special visit and whatever. I want to hear what the coverage says and how it's reflected in the media, so I've got the same, you know, experience as everyone else, rather than colouring it by being there. But, you know, the claim that comes from many quarters is that there are people taking part in the protest, the anti-frackers, who are, for want of a better expression, professional protesters, troublemakers, people who've deliberately hijacked this local protest in a way that local protesters don't really approve of.
I think that's unfortunate that perception's been given, and I think that has been illustrated. And I think, as Councillor Chapman said earlier, there have been elements that have taken action that some of the more local protesters have not been happy about. But we've got to focus on the issue, which is that we want to stop fracking. And actually, Jonathan, if you did visit the gate, you would see that the vast majority of people that are there on a daily basis, and have been there now for weeks in all weathers, are local people who feel very strongly against this industry. I'm really pleased that Suzanne came on the programme, because I know that she has suffered within her own village, and she doesn't feel happy living in the village anymore because of the way others in the village have treated her, because she's seen as part of the campaign. But I think it's just so unfortunate, and we need to focus back on what the issue is. And I have to say that, you know, we've seen incidents in that village when these big trucks have been coming through, where they actually really can't barely get around the roads coming up to the site. And what I want to say to the villagers who are feeling, you know, that they don't like the protest, if this goes ahead, if Third Energy and other companies get more planning permission for more wells in Rydal, the traffic that they're seeing now, the disruption that they're seeing now, will be nothing compared with the hundreds of trucks that will then come through their village to service this industry. And I really think that they need to refocus back. I've been working with the local police, as of other members of Frack Free Rydal, and trying to talk to people and trying to calm the things we've seen, the frayed tempers and the the loud voices, because we've got to very much focus on stopping the industry, and that's why Frack Free United was formed, because to stop this industry, we've got to take it to a further level. We've got to act politically, not just at the gate.
Isn't it inevitable that what's going to happen is, we've already heard references to it this morning, and it's not the first and probably won't be the last time, scathing references to the part that the police force are playing in this, because inevitably, I suppose, if the protesters choose to see it in this way, the role of the police will be interpreted, and the expression keeps being used, sort of private security force for third energy, X, Y and Z, and it's inevitable that anger will be directed at them. We've heard this account of a protester spitting in the face of a policewoman.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there when that incident happened. I would have said something if I had, and I have said things to people about just trying to keep on top of your temper. Tempers will fray in the circumstances, because people want to stop those trucks going into that site, and they feel that they are pushed back very quickly. So I have to say, what I've seen down there, sometimes it's been calm and people have been moved back by the police, but they tend to act far too quickly. They tend to be a little heavy-handed sometimes, and tempers do fray under those circumstances. But I also appreciate that the police are there doing their job.
What do you say to someone who's, I won't use his real name, he uses a nom de guerre, he calls himself Officer Crabtree. Whether he is an officer, I don't know, but I know it's not his real name because I can see his email address. But he says, on the subject of fracking and the protesters, he says, these folk are thugs. They do not want to work. Their relationships with the local community
that's just not acceptable.
Well, let me finish it. Their relationship with the local community and the law are from views of blind hate and a determination to cause as much negative disruption as possible. Check them out, local or not. Their address, their council tax payments, and signs himself Officer Crabtree.
That is just not acceptable. I've been down to the gate. The vast majority of people who are down there on a daily basis, in whatever weather, are local people who feel strongly about this issue. Yes, other people come to support from other parts of the country, because everybody has a right to legal protest. Some things with the police haven't been ideal, and some of the lock-ons in the middle of the road have caused disruption to the local community. But as other people have said, the protesters have been quite careful not to disrupt traffic lanes. When they took action the other week, they made quite clear that they were on one side of the road and the local people could still get through in their vehicles. And the roads get closed by the police, not by the protesters.
Di Keel, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your opinions this morning. Di Keel, part of Frack Free Rydale, part of a national anti-fracking movement. Again, a local councillor, a local elected person, just appealing for people to, be reasonable, keep their tempers. Alan is on the line from Pickering. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning.
How does all this get resolved? Whereabouts are your sympathies? With the people of Kirby Misperton who are worried, or with the protesters who say they've got a wider environmental worry?
Definitely. We're all against the fracking, but there's ways and means of going about it. The police are stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think they're doing the best they can. It could be worse. Say, for example, they're sending the right police, it'd be a heck of a lot worse. The protesters, it's not all of them, but there is a select few. They are out to cause a disruption. They are a criminal element. If you look online, there's records, criminal records. It's there to be seen. If you investigate, if you do a bit of digging, you can see it. I think what's happened, the founder members of the anti-fracking have
just be please just be extremely careful what you're going to say now, because I don't want to.
Well,
you may say people have got criminal
It's like a monster's being created that can't be controlled.
Where does that leave local people then? Like some of whom we've heard from this morning, like your dog. Where does that leave local people who are anti-fracking? They want to support peaceful protest, but they find themselves all perhaps tarred with the same brush, and they end up like the lady we spoke to in the last hour, Suzanne, I think it was, who you could hear the distress in her voice. She's getting, abuse from other local residents, from her neighbours, who are angry with her for being, as they see it, on the side of the protesters, and they don't like the protesters. It's an awful situation.
It is, yes, but I mean, the protesters, like I say, it's not them all, it's a select few, and what better way to cause disruption than to divide a neighbourhood, divide Rydale, which is exactly what they're doing. If the protesters hadn't behaved in the way they're doing now, there wouldn't be all this trouble. I mean, at the start of it, you used to get protesters with the placards and two Tiffy supporters, which I did. A lot of people did. But now it's getting, the towers in the middle of the roads. I mean, I have to commute through it every day to get to work. And when they put the towers up or whatever, they're doing, it means we have to take detours. It's added expense. It's added, if you don't get to work on time, you lose pay.
Alan, you sound to me like a highly reasonable man with a wise head on his shoulders. What would you say to people about resolving this?
Well, it needs people with level heads. We need to get together and talk without physical actions. I mean, there is a saying that the pen is mightier than the sword, and I still think that. The beef isn't with locals, and it is with Third Energy to a degree, but who let Third Energy do this? It's the government. Well, why doesn't anybody write to the government,
Alan, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. You've spoken some good common sense, I think, this morning. An anonymous text from someone this morning says, whenever they go to the gates of Kirby Misperton's fracking site to protest, they are welcomed with tea and cakes. Last time, they say, we played drama games in front of the gates. It's a movement of locals, of farmers, of children, of students, of pensioners and voters from all major political parties. It is, says our anonymous texter this morning, a beautiful, diverse movement, and I have never been intimidated, this person says. Another texter says, the protesters are deluded. They block the roads and then accuse the police of closing them and claim that fracking fractures communities when the problem is the protesters and their desire to fight with the police at any opportunity. Absolutely diametrically opposed interpretations of the same situation. I think so much of this depends on how you see it or even how you choose to see it this morning. Thank you for your text messages. Text is 81333. Start your message with the word York. Email is jonathan@bbc.co.uk. Let's talk to Dr. Tim Thornton, who is a retired GP who lives in the approximate area, who joins us on the line this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jonathan.
How is this to be resolved? What do you make of this apparent tension that's grown and even division in the Kirby Misperton community over the way the protesters are protesting?
Well, it's a sad state of affairs and entirely predictable, unfortunately, because the onset of fracking, the onset of activities, has been shown to cause disruption of communities. Functioning communities fall to pieces, they argue, and in the Natural Environment Research Council meeting with contemporaries in America, they describe corrosive communities and fragmented communities as being one of the social impacts of fracking. They go hand in hand. And if you think what's happening just now with your conversations and with these divided opinions and the upset and the anger and the frustration, this is exactly what goes along with fracking. And who gains from all this? Well, of course, the gas company, because it's taken our eye off the ball. We are not arguing with the village. We are not arguing with the protesters. The argument is that the fracking has been shown to be dangerous, has been shown to be disadvantageous. These communities have a boom and bust economy, although I don't think that Kirby Misperton is probably going to recognise any boom because there's no significant accommodation providing for the people coming to do the fracking. There's a very limited way that Kirby Misperton can benefit, but so many ways in which they're going to lose out.
You're a health professional, and in your time you have probably done consultations with more people than you care to think of. You must, in your time, have had people sitting in front of you with social, mental health problems, family problems, that kind of issue. I'm sure you have. And you've probably had to use your wisdom and experience to advise them. As somebody who's a recognised professional in the community, what's your observation about the way this is progressed, about the way this is healed, and so that the divisions are not made too deep? People can disagree, but people can disagree politely without falling out and making one another's lives a misery.
I absolutely agree. I mean, when people were asked at the outset of this whole threat to the community, way a year or 2 years ago, the vast majority of the village were against fracking. There was a concern, historical concern about protest when, way back in time, Flamingo had an issue with protesters about dolphins and that type of thing. And that coloured the history of that village and their attitude towards protectors, whatever. And even many, many people who hadn't been involved, weren't living in the village at that time, seem to be coloured by that history, which of course gets embroidered over the years. Now, I think that there would be a real possibility of a proper conversation between the village, who feel very hurt by this and damaged by this, and the people who are trying to protect not only the village from the impact of fracking and the wider community of Rydale, but North Yorkshire, the country. And let's face it, these protectors are passionate about the damage that another fossil fuel will do to climate chaos.
But they mustn't, in the course of doing that, damage a community.
Well, I think there needs to be an understanding on both sides as to what is being attempted in this protest and how the village feel about having a mixture of local people and outsiders interfering with their everyday life.
Dr. Thornton, we're going to have to leave it there. I just want to fit in somebody else before we go to our travel news, but thank you very much indeed for your observations this morning. Let's speak to the Reverend Jackie Cray, who actually lives in Kirby Misperton. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the programme. So, you're retired clergy, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
What's your observation? Does the church have a role to play in this as the sort of as a spiritual and social leader?
Yes, absolutely. I think the church needs to be a peaceful presence. I live in the village. I'm against fracking. I do go down to the well site and I carry a placard that says I have a right to peaceful protest. I've never sworn at or abused anybody. Sorry, I'm just separating two cats here.
People do all sorts as they take part in this programme. Cats separated?
Yes, they're separated, yes. And I think there's been a sea change in this village over the last week. Something has got whipped up suddenly in terms of anger and hurt, and I can understand where some of that is coming from. But people need to realise that actually the focus of their anger ought to be the industry itself that started fracking when it hasn't started fracking, but wants to bring fracking to this area just half a mile from a village. It should never have happened. It should never have put villagers and residents in the position that they're in as sacrifice lambs for this industry. Even the MP has said that these well sites should be a mile away from residential areas. So I can understand there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of anger, but some of it has been caused by the police coming in huge, unreasonable numbers. I mean, frankly, there were more police vans here yesterday. I think we counted, was it 15 going through the village, than there were police vans at that shooting in America. Now, that just gives you an idea of the scale of things here. There's been such an overreaction.
Do you think the police are mishandling it?
Yes, I do. I think from a senior level, I'm not saying that the police on the ground, although some of them I think haven't handled protest as well and have made things worse. But I think at a senior level, the management of police and how they, for example, they bring the convoys through very fast through our main street. I just brought our cat back from the vet's, whose paw was crushed yesterday and has had to have his toe amputated. Now, this morning at 7 o'clock, there were vehicles from the well site going through Main Street at about 45 miles an hour. There is no need for that. There was not a single soul around. There was not a protester in sight.
I'm going to have to go to our travel news in just a second or two's time, because we are governed by these bits of timing in the programme. Just a word from you as, again, a community leader, somebody respected and someone who's used to dealing with this kind of thing. How is this healed?
I think it has to be in conversation and meeting together. And all of this needs dialing down. All of us need to, whatever our feelings, and some of them come from very real places, we need to dial them down, and we need to be ready to listen to one another and respect different integrities.
Reverend Jackie Cray, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Reverend Jackie Cray, who lives in Kirby Misperton, a resident of the local area, retired vicar, and, as you've heard, someone who opposes fracking but wants the community to stay together. It's 27 minutes past 10. Let's go back to the phones. David is on the line from Malton this morning. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Hi. What's your take on this difficult situation?
It is a difficult situation, and I don't think the level of protest in some cases is making it any better. But my beef is that this assertion that the protesters represent everybody in Rydale and the constituency. There's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. There's never been a survey. There's never been any scientific assessment of what people in Rydale actually think about this. There is a movement against it, but there's also an awful lot of people I speak to saying, whatever these guys are in favour of, I'm against it. The other point is this is a trial. If I was against fracking because I thought it was dangerous, I'd be encouraging a trial that would surely prove it.
The protesters, as you'll be aware, they think, to use the expression, that this is the thin end of the wedge. Allow this to go ahead and don't protest and don't try and stop it, and you just open up the experience for everybody across the country.
But they claim to be acting on behalf of a majority of people in the area, and I've never seen any evidence of what the majority of people in the area think. There's never been a survey. They're acting on the basis of their own understanding of what's going on and their own self-righteousness and getting on with doing a protest when nobody actually asked them to do it.
Let me just throw a couple of text messages at you this morning. This comes from someone who signs themselves Pickering resident. Please remember that most protesters are local, and they put local in capitals, from the village of Kirby Misperton and from the Rydale area. They say if our water is poisoned, we will all be affected, says Pickering resident. Henry says, I have never felt intimidated by the protesters. I drink tea and have cake. However, he says, the police have shoved me, dragged me, unnecessarily filmed me. They stopped the 20-minute slow walk so escalated the situation to force people to use lock-ons. Police send a disproportionate amount of resources, and that causes the tensions to run high.
Well, I can't comment on the policing because I've not actually been a victim, as it were, or a witness of the policing. But obviously the people who are protesting are against it. But they shouldn't claim that the whole of Rydale or the whole of the Thurston Malton constituency is against it. I mean, frankly, nobody knows. I don't know, you don't know, and they don't know. They can't claim that the majority supports what they're doing, because there's no evidence to either say that they do or they don't.
No, but you don't deny them their right to express their opinion, whether they're representing the majority view or not. Do you deny them their right to have their say?
I'm all in favour of protest. What I'm not in favour of is people saying they represent my point of view and a whole load of other people's point of view when they don't know that.
David, thank you for your thoughts this morning. David on the line from Malton. More text this morning, an anonymous text from someone saying they are so tired of these fools, to use their word, these fools who call themselves our protectors. This texter says they are stirring up so much hatred for themselves with their behaviour. Their blockades and publicity stunts are now causing real problems for our villages. Thank you for your text. Another person says they run a care company, which is caring for an end-of-life client in the area. Carers need to visit this person 4 times a day, and they say it is a nightmare situation for carers and their clients alike. We have been told, they say, by police not to connect with the protesters, and have even given us a code word to use if we have a problem. Using different routes is not good, as we have other clients to go to on a fairly tight schedule. The sooner these people leave, these people being the protesters, or at least stop blocking the roads, the better. And finally, Nicola says she is very sorry for the villagers of Kirby Misperton and that they're suffering such disruption. However, says Nicola, they need to be clear where the blame lies, with a government determined to override local democracy, and that seems not to realise climate change will kill us all if we don't stop fueling it. Thank you for all your opinions this morning. As I say, it's an unusual and almost unprecedented decision to decide to tear up the running order of this programme and do something completely different, but the strength of feeling this morning, and I think we've just reflected the tip of an iceberg, been inundated with emails, text messages, calls and comments this morning. I hope that somewhere along the line you have heard a view that somewhere approximates to what you would have said if you'd got on air this morning, but thank you very much indeed for everything you've had to say. It's not a subject, of course, that BBC Radio York will leave, and as I say, we don't take a stance on things, we don't have a view. We're here to reflect the views of local people, and I hope we do that reasonably well. Sometimes we won't get it entirely right. Be patient with us, we're only human.